I want to thank Rep. Leslie Freeway of Love. It's a catchy nickname. I don't know if it's going to hang on, but I like it. For sponsoring this bill and being such a dogged advocate for acknowledging the Queen of Soul and paying homage to her. And of course, Mayor Duggan, who's been a phenomenal partner and has made some announcements here in the city of honoring Aretha as well. You know, we are here today to honor and celebrate the life of a true American icon. Aretha Franklin was a trailblazer. She served a lifetime for this city and around this nation and built a legacy that's reached every part of this world. She went with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at age 16, traveling across the country to promote civil rights for all African Americans in this country. And she was the first African American woman featured on the cover of Time magazine. She taught generations of young women what RESPECT meant. And as a fourth grader, I remember watching her sing Think in the Blues Brother film in 1980. She lived an extraordinary life, and she still never forgot her roots and where she came from. Detroit was her home. She grew up here. She started singing here at New Bethel Baptist Church, where her father was the pastor, and spent decades of her life making this city her home. The bill I'm signing today will officially designate a portion of M10 freeway between Livernois and I-94 in Detroit as the Aretha Franklin Memorial Highway. So when people drive into Detroit, they remember the profound impact that Aretha Franklin had. She had an indelible impact on the city, on our state, and on our nation. She once said she'd been around the world, London, Paris, Germany, and all those wonderful places, but there was no place like Detroit, Michigan. And she was right. In her lifetime, she continuously gave back to the city that helped raise her, whether it was by giving back to the church or working to ensure equal rights. The work she did changed the city of Detroit, the state of Michigan, and our country for the better. And to ensure her legacy lives on, we will continue her work to build Detroit, to make sure that this continues to be a place where everyone has real opportunity. I'm proud to sign this bill here today in the city that she loved and the city that she called home, because there is no place like Detroit, and there was no one like Aretha Franklin. Thank you, and now let's welcome the Lieutenant Governor for a few remarks.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, everyone. This is really a momentous occasion. You know, it's not often that we get a chance to mark our land, to mark our city with the legacy of an icon who Detroit gets to call our own. Yes. And that is the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin. And as a Detroiter, as someone who grew up with her music being the soundtrack to my childhood, we all understand what it means for someone to leave an imprint on not just our hearts, and not just our country, but on our humanity. So it is only fitting that we landmark her legacy here in the city that she calls home, so that when people come into the city of Detroit, when they come to experience our culture, our food, our beauty, our diversity, that it is riding on Aretha Franklin's highway that they will travel to come in to our city and experience for all that it is worth. It is such a blessing to be here. I want to thank Representative Love for her leadership. I want to thank the legislature for making this happening and recognizing the power that this woman had and the power that she has wielded on our community for generations, and that she will yield for generations to come. We're here because it is so important, it is so critical that we know that people will understand our history and live it day to day. It will inspire them to impact generations future to come. And Aretha Franklin is perhaps no better example than doing just that. Imagine the children, the young women and men who she not only inspired to sing, but inspired to preach, inspired to write, inspired to draw, inspired to be their best selves. This is what her legacy is truly all about. And it's an honor to be a part of it. And the state of Michigan is honored to call her our own. So thank you so much for being here this morning, and thank you for celebrating her legacy. And now I want to bring up the sponsor of this legislation, Representative Leslie Love from Detroit.
Thank you. Hey! Wow. What an exciting morning. Yeah. And before I get into my comments, I have to give some special thank yous. This was a long journey. And some of you may be here thinking, it's a highway, Memorial Highway naming bill. Why such pomp and circumstances? And I have to tell you, it's no easy feat to get this done. And so I wanted to thank all my colleagues in the 100th legislature, in the House and in the Senate, and a special shout out to those two senators on Transportation Committee, who without those two votes, this may not have come to pass. And then I want to thank my wonderful, illustrious Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who then understood from the beginning its worthiness and agreed to sign the bill. And so I thank you. And then to the angels in the outfield, and you know who you are, who advocated behind the scenes for this moment to happen so that this legacy can be memorialized in this way, thank you. And then also to the Franklin family and what you've been able to do to keep Miss Franklin's legacy, life, memory, her works at the forefront, never forgotten, always appreciated, and that we know our heritage and we know our legacy. I'd like to thank all the people who testified and came to Lansing to help support this bill, like my Greekdom sisters, the women of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, the women of Delta Sigma Theta sorority incorporated, the women of Sigma Gamma Rho incorporated, and Zeta Phi Beta. And it's important that I mention them because some of you don't know that Miss Franklin was an honorary Delta. So it was very important to me that I got other Greek women involved in this process, that it would be the Greek women who would come together, the African-American Greek women, who would come together to raise the money, because by the way, there are no taxpayers' dollars that are used to make sure that this sign is put up. It is the women that you see behind me. And Jim and Latisse Thomas from Real Entertainers, Actors, and Athletes League. So I want to thank all of you for your contributions to this moment. So I have to tell you a little story. And I'm going to take a privilege of bill sponsorship. Because I met Miss Aretha Franklin some 30 years ago. I was a grad student. Miss Arlene wants me to say 20 to keep us younger, but it was really just what it is. We look good. But some 30 years ago, as a graduate student at Wayne State University's Hillberry Theater program, I was a fellow there. And we did what I consider a residency with the Arts League of Michigan. And we were courting Miss Franklin to do a project with us. And Miss Arlene Franklin helped usher that meeting. And as a result of that, Miss Franklin invited us over to her home for a Christmas celebration that she does. And I was so nervous because it was the Queen of Soul. What do you wear to the Queen of Soul's house? And so I didn't, I'm a poor college student. I didn't know what outfit to put on. So I was a little bit late. But when I arrived, she was so gracious and such a approachable person. And her humanity showed with her chitlins and her greens and just the whole, it was family in that moment. And so I appreciated and just respected the opportunity to be in her presence. But also I want you to know that Miss Franklin, like myself, is an artist activist. And what I sometimes think we may overlook in our tech-crazy world are the contributions of the creative economy. And so this was important for me to make sure that this happened, that we don't forget our singers, our dancers, our writers, our poets, our athletes, the people who, when there's a cause, we call on them. I remember at Miss Franklin's funeral how Judge Mathis said the last conversation he had with her was about making sure that we took care of the people in Flint. So even up until then, she was still advocating. So she's not just a soul singer from Detroit. Thank you. She's also a person who really cared about people. And she, like me, are one of those folks who not really rushed to the front, is not really popular, like, everybody knows, everybody should know Aretha Franklin, but what she was good at was helping where it mattered. And that's why I picked the location on the Lodge Freeway. I didn't want to take it all over. I thought about it. But I knew Miss Franklin wasn't that type of person. You just use what you need. You give what you can. And so it's very important that that section right near her father's church and right near the Avenue of Fashion, kind of the mecca of African-American culture and arts and entertainment, right in the West Side neighborhood of Detroit. And then that path took us all the way down where it intersection with I-94, that east-west corridor. And it showed her depth and her width of the reach of Miss Aretha Franklin. So that when you ride down that freeway of love, that Aretha L. Franklin Memorial Highway, that you remember that it was the creative economy, the economy that brings over $1.5 billion to the state of Michigan, and that's just the nonprofit sector. The creative economy that brought the film industry here and put thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to work. The creative economy, the creative class matters. And so young people and not so young people anymore, that we continue to follow our passion and our legacy. And I hope when people drive down the Lodge Freeway and they see that sign, that they'll think of all the wonderful things and the opportunities that reside right here in the city of Detroit. And I am so proud to call myself a Detroiter. I'm so thankful that the governor selected this place with the pink Cadillac to honor our queen, an icon, Miss Aretha L. Franklin. And in closing, I'll say this. It's very important to me, this moment, that the state of Michigan is honoring Mrs. Franklin. Some people say, they just named an amphitheater. She has a street. Does she really need a highway? Absolutely. Because buildings' names can change, amphitheaters' names can change, but when you get a memorial highway, that memorial highway is forever. And it is the states recognizing Miss Aretha Franklin. If popes can recognize her, Harvard and Yale, kings and queens, well, surely the state of Michigan can do the same. And so I am honored and just delighted to sponsor this very important bill for Miss Aretha L. Franklin. I thank you all for sharing in that. Thank you. And with that, I'm bringing up the executor of the Franklin Foundation, Miss Sabrina Owens.
Good morning. Good morning. To Governor Whitmer, Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist, Representative Leslie Love, the Michigan Legislature, Mayor Duggan, and other distinguished guests. On behalf of the Franklin family, we are honored to be here this morning for the ceremonial signing of House Bill 4060, designating a portion of M10, the John C. Lodge Freeway, as the Aretha L. Franklin Memorial Highway. On behalf of the Franklin family, this news of this honor has traveled near and far. The family has received congratulatory calls, notes, and social media posts from friends, supporters, and fans around the world. So it's not just here in Detroit that we celebrate this. We know Aretha would have been profoundly proud and honored. She loved the state of Michigan, she loved the city of Detroit, and no matter where she went, where she moved for brief periods of time, Aretha always came back home to her beloved Detroit. August 16th will mark the first anniversary of our beloved Aretha's passing. And it's remarkable how both the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan has continued to honor her in very distinctive ways. I know I speak for the family, my Aunt Earlene and our family who's not here with us today, when I say we are honored and humbled for your generosity and your thoughtfulness. The Aretha L. Franklin Memorial Highway is truly the freeway of love. Thank you.
Isn't this a great day? You know, and the timing could not be more perfect. I want to thank Representative Love, Governor Whitmer, and the whole team that got this done. And to schedule it today, right up the street, we have the National Convention of the NAACP. And in 1963, it was Reverend C.L. Franklin who reached out to Reverend Martin Luther King. And they organized the March of Freedom, which came right down Woodward Avenue, turned into Cobo, and it was there Dr. King first gave his I Have a Dream speech 4 months before he gave it in Washington, D.C. So to be here today, honoring the Franklin legacy, and of course Aretha Franklin grew up in New Bethel Church, is where her voice was first heard, and then it carried around the world, bringing joy to millions everywhere. And as Sabrina said, she always moved back to her hometown in the city of Detroit. And so I was pleased that Detroit City Council, I know Councilman Gabe Leland is here, earlier this year, christened the Aretha Franklin Amphitheater. And I want you to know, Representative, the name of that amphitheater is never going to be changed. Okay. But that reaches out to all the music fans here, but Aretha Franklin touched this country in ways that went far beyond music. And now, with the renaming of the Aretha L. Franklin Memorial Highway, everyone who travels through Detroit on that freeway will be remembered that Detroit is the home of the Queen of Soul. Thank you for everybody who made it possible.
All right, we're all going to move behind the beautiful pink Cadillac, and I'm going to sign the bill on the Cadillac. We want to thank Don Williamson for bringing his beautiful Cadillac for us to use today.